True or false? There was another attempt on Trump's life. Now, before you answer, let's try to put aside our biases and look at just the facts in 3 parts to clarify what really happened at the White House Correspondents' Dinner on April 25th. First, the specific inconsistencies that the news cycle doesn't want to touch. Second, the players behind Trump's White House ballroom and what the public record says that the ballroom actually is. And third, the psychology of real trauma, the behavioral framework that explains why all of this is happening right now, and the concept of manufactured consent. Now, before we get into it, let's address the elephant in the room.
There will be some shots fired tonight in the room.
How did somebody get a gun into the White House Correspondents' Dinner? Honestly, as somebody who went, there was no security. You just showed your ticket and you were able to completely get in. There was just no pat-downs, no metal detectors, nothing going on. So
inside, they started all of a sudden it just started getting noisy. Tables getting flipped over, guys running in with guns, and they were screaming, "Get down." I didn't get down. It was fucking awesome. I literally took every minute of it in.
When a person genuinely believes that their life was just threatened, when the amygdala fires and goes into fight or flight mode, and the prefrontal cortex goes offline, taking all logic with it, there's a specific neurologically documented window of time during which the brain simply cannot execute complex strategic thinking. That's not a theory. That's neurology. And no, the brain doesn't get used to threats to life. If that were true, then soldiers wouldn't survive deployment. The brain reacts to each and every threat the same way. And while it might look slightly different in different people, that window is hours long. So pay attention to what this administration did and what they said in the hours after the assassination attempt. As a behavioral analyst, what I saw didn't look or sound like a trauma response. It looked and sounded like a coordinated rollout. So let's break it all down and see if we can't get just a little closer to the truth. And stay with me, because part 2 alone is gonna stop you cold. Let's get into it. Part 1, the inconsistencies. Because where it happened matters. Okay, so let's start with the obvious. The White House Correspondents' Dinner happens at the Washington Hilton, and it always has. That's not a Trump venue. He didn't choose it, and he doesn't control it. And he has nothing to do with where that event is held. The event is hosted by the White House Correspondents Association. It's an independent, nonprofit organization founded in 1914, made up of journalists that cover the presidency. That's it. It operates independently of both the White House and the government. They booked the venue, not Trump. Trump was just a guest. And keep in mind that in all his years in the White House, this was the first time he actually attended the event. What a coincidence. Now, I need you to hold that thought because it's going to be relevant when we analyze what he said at his press conference following the shooting. Now, let's walk through the timeline because that's the first tell. Hours after an attempt on his life, Trump was already at the White House giving a press conference, and in just a few minutes, made a pitch for the ballroom.
We need the ballroom. That's why Secret Service, that's why the military are demanding it.
Then by Sunday morning, he posts on Truth Social that the shooting, quote, would never have happened with the military top secret ballroom. I'm sorry, what? Why not? The shooting took place at a non-government event, at a hotel he doesn't own, and that's booked annually by the Independent Press Corps. So how does that justify a construction project at the White House? Do you guys see how this doesn't make any sense? It's like getting bad service at a restaurant and then using that as justification for installing a new kitchen in your own house. One thing has nothing to do with the other. If this is connecting dots for you, hit subscribe, because this is exactly the type of breakdowns that we cover here. The second tell reveals coordination, and coordination takes planning. Within hours of the event, House Majority Whip Tom Emmer was on Fox News where he politicized the shooting.
This is a big deal that these Democrats are literally playing with the safety of Americans.
So now we have two narratives. We need the ballroom, and this happened because the DHS isn't being funded. But is that really the issue? Because multiple videos have surfaced from attendees at the dinner who say that security at the event was non-existent. Besides, Most events are secured by private firms, and no shootings occur. So even if there weren't a single DHS employee available to pull security, which wasn't the case, but let's just pretend, there are still tons of private companies. So why not hire them? But again, that wasn't even the case. There were both a security team and military personnel present. In fact, a lot of them. So the question remains, how did the suspect even get in? This isn't a DHS funding issue. It's a logistical one. Are we really supposed to ignore the fact that no one secured the premises or stopped the suspect from running through the lobby? So yes, it is weird that Tom Emmer made this about DHS funding when DHS funding had nothing to do with it. Just like what happens at the Washington Hilton has nothing to do with what happens at the White House. And then there's Lindsey Graham, because of course there is.
We're going to have to accommodate the times in which we live.
Top Republican allies of President Donald Trump are urging Congress to sign off on a $400 million plan to build a new ballroom on White House grounds.
We're going to build this facility.
Leading the effort, Senators Lindsey Graham, Katie Britt, and Eric Schmidt, arguing the project is about security and control.
New legislation announced within hours of an evacuation. Now, I want you to take a beat and honestly ask yourself, how long does it usually take Congress to write new bills? And then ask yourself if this lightning speed tempo isn't weird. Trump claims we need the ballroom. Emmer claims Democrats are playing with your safety, and Graham offers legislation to fund it. 3 people, 3 narratives, all pointing in exactly the same direction, within hours. Conclusion, villain, and solution. This is a pattern. In behavioral analysis, these patterns are called clusters. To understand a pattern, you first need to know the baseline behavior, how things usually work. One deviation from baseline behavior isn't enough to raise a red flag. But when there's a cluster of deviations, a pattern of changed behavior, that points to a departure from the baseline, from the norm, and signals that something's definitely up. A politically coordinated response to a shooting isn't a coincidence. It's architecture. And at this speed, it's safe to assume that it was built before a single shot was even fired. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Nadia, but politicians always politicize things fast. That's not new. Fair. But here's where this stops being politics as usual and starts becoming something entirely different. Because we haven't addressed what the ballroom actually is. And once you know, the speed, the coordination, the specific arguments, and the legislation, all of it is going to look very, very different. Part 2, what the ballroom actually is. Words matter. The name that we give to things shapes and manipulates the way that people see and respond to them. Trump tore down the east wing of the White House to build, quote, a ballroom. So we assume that it's a space for presidential events. And most people have just brushed it off as another one of Trump's ego trips. And I don't think that's entirely untrue. But the Dre dossier dug up the public contract records on this project. And what she found changes everything. Layer 1, the contractor. The lead contractor on this project is a company called Clark Construction. Look them up. They built the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. They built CISA headquarters. They built US CENTCOM. And they currently hold a $950 million contract with the US Navy. Are we really supposed to believe that Clark Construction builds ballrooms too? They specialize in classified military infrastructure, and their portfolio reads like a classified government infrastructure catalog, not like a company that builds event spaces. And then we have layer 2, the architect. On December 4th, they fired James McCreary, the project's original architect, a guy known for building beautiful churches and other classical structures, to replace him with Shalom Bayers. Shalom Bayers is the architect who fortified the Pentagon after September 11th. He designed SCIFs, electromagnetically shielded rooms used for the highest level of classified intelligence work. He built structures specifically engineered to survive missile strikes. So why does a ballroom need a guy like that? When you fire the architect who designs churches and replace him with the man who reinforced the Pentagon after the worst attack on American soil in modern history, that's not a design choice. That's security strategy. And in Trump's own words, the military is very much involved in a ballroom. Okay, and here's the kicker. Layer 3, the donor list. Lucky for us, the White House made the donor list publicly available, destroying any possibility that this is all conspiracy theory. Ask yourself, if you're building the most prestigious event space in America, maybe the most famous ballroom in the world, on the grounds of the White House, who do you imagine would be fighting to be on that donor list? Logically, every luxury brand on the planet. Cartier, Steinway, the Ritz-Carlton. But here's who's actually on the list. Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Palantir, which builds intelligence and surveillance software for the CIA and the NSA and is fast on its way to controlling intelligence for the entire US government. But that's a video for another day. Booz Allen Hamilton, which builds classified networks for US intelligence agencies, and Blackstone, donating 200 megawatts of backup power. 200 megawatts of backup power. That's enough to run a small city. For a ballroom. This isn't a ballroom donor list, you guys. It's an infrastructure supply chain. Specifically, the supply chain you'd need for something that draws enormous amounts of power, requires classified information protection, and needs to operate completely independent of the city's power grid. And all of this is sitting on the east wing of the White House, directly above what is publicly documented as the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, the bunker. So you tell me what the ballroom really is, because I can tell you what it isn't. And here's where things get interesting. The lawsuits. The shooting starts to make a whole lot more sense when you realize that this project isn't sailing through unchallenged. On December 12, 2025, the National Trust for Historic Preservation sued the Trump administration to stop the ballroom's construction, arguing that the project bypassed required congressional approvals and historic preservation reviews. As of April 2026, U.S. District Judge Richard J. Leon has repeatedly blocked Trump's $400 million White House ballroom construction, criticized the Department of Justice for arguing that demolishing the East Wing was merely a, quote, alteration or, quote, improvement under existing law, calling this a brazen interpretation of the laws of vocabulary, and ruled that demolition of the East Wing for this project required congressional approval, which it does not have. But after Saturday's shooting, the DOJ ramped up its efforts to pressure the trust to drop its suit. As of now, they're refusing. I guess they're not buying it either. Now, when you're in active litigation, your legal arguments are public record. And the legal defense that they've been using to justify this project is national security. A ballroom for national security? Really, guy? Really? This isn't speculation, you guys, okay? It's not TDS. These are real questions. What's really going on behind that ballroom? Because taxpayers are about to dole out $400 million for a 90,000 square foot White House ballroom at the same time that this administration is cutting VA benefits. And no one's telling us the truth about what it actually is. Now go back and look at the shooting. Analyze the official narrative and do the math. Does it still look legit? Or were they laying a trap? Now, I'm not saying that the shooting was staged. I'm asking if it was. Because a security incident at someone else's building in a room that neither Trump nor the government control is now being used as the justification for a secret construction project at the White House, a project that's actively being challenged in court. And within hours of that incident, not days, hours, fully formed legislation had already been announced to fund that construction. That's the part that can't be explained away. The speed is the tell. It always is. Everything I've just shown you, the quotes, the timeline, the legislation, the lawsuits, that's the what. But we haven't addressed the why. And this is the part that's going to make everything else make sense. Part 3, the behavioral framework. When a person experiences a real life-threatening event, their prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for strategic thinking, language formation, political narrative, and complex planning, goes offline. Not metaphorically, literally. Blood flows shift, cognitive bandwidth narrows. The brain is doing one thing, surviving. And then there's the window. The neurological window that follows a genuine acute threat is hours long. During that window, a person can speak and they can function. But the kind of high-order strategic coordination we've been discussing, that can't be produced authentically by someone inside of that window. So what does a real post-threat response look like? It looks like authorities saying, give us a couple of days to understand what happened, which is exactly how Todd Blanche responded.
The investigation is obviously ongoing and just started. There's federal law enforcement already working on search warrants and doing their job, and I don't want to get ahead of them.
But Carolyn Levitt's response was a confident narrative that contradicted Blanche before an investigation was even made.
The night was hijacked by a crazed anti-Trump individual who traveled across the country to assassinate the president and as many administration officials as possible. The deranged lies and smears against the president, his family, his supporters have led crazy people to believe crazy things. Saturday night served as yet another reminder of how important it is to fund the Department of Homeland Security.
That's not shock. That's strategy. When crisis is real and unplanned, it follows a specific behavioral sequence: survival, stabilization, processing, and then communication. In that order, always. A prepared narrative this specific, this politically coordinated, doesn't come from someone processing fear in real time. It comes from someone who already had the framework ready to go. I'm not making accusations. I'm just stating the obvious. You guys decide what it means. Let's take another look at Trump's press conference after the shooting. He opens with a flippant remark.
And that was very unexpected.
Then quips that he'd be delighted to reschedule the event.
We'll do it again within the next 30 days, and we'll make it bigger and better and even nicer.
First of all, it's not his event. He doesn't get to reschedule it. Second, who talks like that after their life was just threatened? Then he went on to say how it's an honor to be shot at because only people who make an impact have their lives threatened, comparing himself to Lincoln and other presidents who experienced similar threats. The level of grandstanding here tells me that he wasn't afraid for his life. He was able to calmly form a narrative that painted him like a bigger-than-life hero, both a martyr and a fearless leader.
Trump is fearless.
And look, I'll accept that some people can move through acute threat response faster than others. It's real. I've seen it. But faster doesn't look like this.
How worried were you that there were going to be injuries?
I wasn't worried. I understand life.
I don't care how fearless you are, that response in that time frame is inconsistent with genuine acute threat processing. What is consistent across every single person in that administration, Trump, Levitt, Emmer, Graham, isn't shock, it's alignment. Same message, same framing, same villain, same mask. In behavioral science, this is called convergent narrative behavior. When multiple independent actors spontaneously align on the same story after a crisis, one of two things is true. Either they all independently arrived at the same conclusion simultaneously, which is statistically unlikely given the speed, or they were already working from the same script. But you guys already know that. If this were any other situation, you'd see it clear as day. But because some of us are emotionally invested in having a certain narrative be true, we blind our own selves to the facts, even when the truth is right in front of us. And if we were talking about anything else, it wouldn't matter. But we are talking about the safety and security of our own nation. So pretending that the facts don't exist isn't a luxury that we can afford. Like most of you, I've watched this administration's behavioral patterns for a while, and the pattern is consistent. When the noise gets this loud, this fast, and this coordinated, something somewhere else is getting buried. Now, there are three things that I believe this administration deeply needs the public to stop paying attention to right now. And this one event is addressing all three simultaneously. Number one, the Epstein list. Number two, Trump's failures in Iran. And number three, the $5 billion that Trump and his sons have already made with their World Liberty financial stablecoins, digital replacements for the US dollar. If you want to know more about that, Tap the link somewhere above because I break it all down. 1 event, 3 problems managed, and an agenda pushed. Do you see it yet? Let me know in the comments. So what now? Will Trump finally get his mystery intel bunker made? Who knows? But in my opinion, it's obscene to ask taxpayers to fund it without full transparency. But the trap that Trump set after the shooting makes anyone asking for answers look like the bad guy. Valid questions are being reframed as partisan obstruction from people who want the president to be in danger. Watch for that language because it's already being tested. And remember, we've seen this all before. And that's the biggest con of all: manufactured consent. The concept of manufactured consent is the idea that the most powerful form of control isn't force. It's the management of what people are allowed to think about, what stories they tell themselves, and most importantly, what questions they allow themselves to ask. Edward Bernays, the father of propaganda, didn't invent this idea. He weaponized it. He used it to sell cigarettes to women and get America into the First World War. He called it engineering consent. And that's what I want you to take from this today. The most sophisticated manipulation doesn't feel like a lie. It feels like news, like urgency. It feels like you're finally getting the real story, but the real story is just the distraction. The question isn't whether or not to trust the government. After 9/11, 2020, and a host of other events, both past and present, I think most of us can agree that that ship has sailed. The real question is, are you willing to stay aware, push against your biases, and ask the right questions? And the fact that you're still here, watching a video that asks these questions, that's not nothing. That's the thing that holds the whole system accountable. If you've made it this far, you already know what to do. See you on the next vid.